Hi, Evan. Thank you very much for joining me today to talk about your experience of working with us at Plucky Bamboo. First of all, for people that aren't familiar with you, can you tell me a little bit about your company, Scrap, and your role within it?
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. So my name's Evan. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Scrapp. We started Scrapp as a barcode scanning app where you could scan the barcode of a product anywhere in the world and learn how to recycle it. But what we learned through an iterative process of understanding why people couldn't recycle right is they just didn't have the tools to do it correctly. And the problem really wasn't on the individual consumer to sort out the issue. We started to realize that if we were going to make a real impact in reducing waste and putting things in the wrong bin, we needed to turn the tap off at the source of the problem. So over many years of iterations, we've developed a platform that helps businesses, brands, and communities reduce and track and reduce their waste by simple, better data management on their waste programs. So whether you're a business that's putting products on the supermarket shelves, or you're producing it by manufacturing and your own operations, or you've got a community of people that you're having to manage the program for, like your local municipality, we help digitize that entire process to derive cost savings and, more importantly, minimize waste going to landfill. Within the business, I joke that I always just do all the jobs that no one else wants to do as CEO of an early stage startup, constantly helping to try put out fires where I can. But I head up mainly our commercial team efforts.
What would you say is the biggest benefit you've received in terms of working together? Is there something you're now able to do that you weren't before? Do you have clarity on something? Talk to me a bit about that. What's the first thing that comes to mind?
First thing that comes to mind off the bat, messaging. The clarity in messaging is 10 times better than what it was. I know where we sit in the waste industry, we have a unique challenge because everyone produces waste, but it's different for everybody, right? It's ubiquitous, but it's unique. So being able to create a message that can speak to those different organizations within our operations, that speaks to them in a way that wants them to reach out and help have us solve those problems for them, is very challenging. So working with Plucky Bamboo has been fantastic in helping us refine our message and speak to the prospects that we want to work with to help them achieve their waste goals.
For anyone watching, I'd say if you really want a quick way of being able to figure out this kind of stuff, analyze your sales calls, because you'll have the voice of the customer there. You'll understand what they want to say. You'll understand how they say it and the pains that they have. So you definitely had the raw materials there to start with. You already had enough sales calls for us to work with. When you talk about the messaging, then you say it's 10 times clearer now. How do you feel not having clear messaging was holding you back before? What kind of challenges, frustrations was it giving you?
I think it is actually interesting. It's an interesting question because it's across the board, right? You think it's just, oh, I'm not converting enough sales in my pipeline just because I'm not being clear with them. But it also interferes with your product development and your roadmap. And internally as a team, it's like, wait, what are we going to focus on next? Because we're getting some people reach out to us for this and some people reach out to us for that. And then how do you build a product roadmap off of the needs in the pipeline that you can, what you can forecast? And so if you don't have clarity in that, it doesn't just affect kind of commercial perspective, but I would also say it also affects on a technical perspective. Because when you're in an early stage startup and you're having to respond to the market and what it's asking of you, if you don't have that clarity, then you're leaving a technical development cycle with no clear direction. And that brings its own challenges. So I think for us, getting that messaging refined for us as a business and the commercial side has been really helpful in helping us streamline all of the other challenges that we've had in the back end as well. So now the clarity is there, it's much easier for us to turn around and say, okay, we've made our messaging clear. This is what people are coming to us for. We can say no as much as we can say yes, right? And I know there's a lot of importance in knowing when to say no and really keeping core to what you offer, which I think from a team's perspective internally, it's been so helpful for us to take that mindset on.
Was there like a specific turning point that made you realize that was something you wanted to work on? Or did it kind of come naturally from our conversations?
I think it came quite naturally. I think overall we could see, so I had the data on how people are engaging with the website and looking at the inbounds and the responses I was getting on sales calls. And I started to piece together, okay, clearly something isn't resonating, because when you meet, it's funny, we were just talking before this about when you meet in person, how you can get that penny drop moment, that aha moment of like, oh, you're going to be the ones that solve this problem for me. And you can get it a lot quicker when you're in person, right? Because you have
Yeah.
so many other communication kind of parameters that you can work with, like body language and expressing yourself. Whereas when you don't have that, it becomes very challenging. So when we realized the aha moment wasn't coming as quickly as we would have liked, especially through website conversions that we were tracking, whether that was through just sales conversations where they were like, the decision maker hasn't quite understood this. For us, that was a really big moment for us to go, okay, we need to work on this clearly, because it shouldn't be happening. When we see in person and we're getting these aha moments, we know we're solving the problem, but it's clearly not converting for people that we aren't meeting one to one. So therefore, there's a barrier here that we need to remove to help people make that understanding of what we do that much quicker.
It's easy to look at low conversion rates on your website as something that's wrong with the website, and the fact that you're converting more in person because I guess you build more of a relationship with them, things like that. Was there a specific driver that made you feel that messaging was the thing to work on?
I think there was one thing that comes to mind immediately, and this is something that I'd come across online, which I thought was really interesting. And I believe you've also alluded to the point before. When your messaging is so clear, it doesn't matter about the position of a button or the setup of the design, right? Like, yes, it's important, but if you are not absolutely crystal clear talking to your ICP, then for me, it's very difficult to think that, that's going to be the mover, right? Like, I just got to position this here rather than there. Like, if you're genuinely speaking to them in a strong way that resonates with them, they will seek you out, right? They know this is a really big problem for me. You have spoken to me, and that is why I want to work with you. Now, through the work that we were doing with the messaging and like the ads testing that we did, that was another thing that I loved, was it helped us split test all these different messaging to see what resonated in the market. And we pivoted from just talking about features on our website to then talking about the benefits, right? And we're speaking to the problems that individuals have. How we solve them is what we can then introduce them to on a call. But the most important part is we are solving these problems for our clients. We want to show them as quickly as possible what problems they are so they feel heard, and we want to talk to us on how we're going to solve them.
I always look at messaging as like a force accelerator for everything else. As you said, it helps you with the product development map, helps in terms of lowering customer acquisition costs, it helps in terms of conversion, all that kind of stuff. Have you seen any real results come through from that messaging work yet?
So one of what we were doing was we've been working on like the AI SEO side of stuff as a result of the messaging. And so, yeah, we've had direct sales calls booked coming in through the AI summaries that are coming out of like, if you're Googling or putting into Chat GPT or something like, hey, how do I reduce my waste program costs, for example, we now speak a lot more to that rather than like, oh, we're a digital waste tracking tool that does X, Y, and Z, right? And then, so we've had direct sales calls booked through those. So the optimization of messaging has had an indirect effect, I guess, with like kind of the direct conversions coming in. But I think mainly from a sales perspective now, it's getting on a sales call, even with ourselves, right? How much more clarity we have when we speak has a much higher level of credibility and conviction, that when you have a jumbled up message and you know you're not being 100% clear by no fault of anyone's other than your own. It's just it's part of the iterative process, right, of being a founder and understanding your customers' problems, etc. So I would say, yeah, that for sure.
Has it helped you personally in any way?
I think so. My ability to articulate what Scrapp does is more varied. So I can now, I think what was really interesting is when you're clear on the messaging and you get used to it, you can then change the way you approach it depending on the audience. And I think that is such an underrated part of having a clear understanding of messaging. Because sure, being able to say something in a straight, like from A to B, right, in a straight line, that's great. But that might not be for some of your pipeline, right? That might not be relevant. So if you can find ways of bringing in anecdotes and relating their story to your journey between A to B, even if it's not in a straight line, it adds a level of storytelling, which bolsters the credibility and the conviction in how you speak. So I would say that for me personally, it's really helped me articulate better in different ways through the ears of my audience.
Marketing is proving that your product works, whereas sales is proving your product works for them. And I think that's the really important thing you've just touched on there is when you can tailor that messaging to that specific person and what they need, what their jobs to be done is, that's when you can really fly in terms of sales. Are there any other areas of the business where working together has helped you?
I think the messaging has been huge. Oh, and yeah, so outbound, like, so we've struggled with outbound for a while. I mean, ever since the dawn of the AI slop era, as they've been calling it, outbound has generally decreased, right? I'm sure I speak to a lot of people who might be listening. It's every day you're inundated with a lot of clearly AI generated emails now that seem to be passing all the filters. Now, when we first started doing cold outbound back in 2022, we were having an incredibly high booking and conversion rate from what we were sending out because firstly the AI stuff hadn't really started kicking off, and the filtering systems in the email boxes, they still like we were able to get through and able to speak to the messaging, not as much as we wanted to. I feel like had we worked together 3 years ago when we were doing the initial outreach, it probably would have been even higher. But now the landscape has changed where that cold outbound with the AI doesn't work as well as it could do. I mean, we're now at a stage where a lot of people are doing it, so it's just become very saturated. So being able to get insight on how we could make that perform better was good, and really learn the best practices for these cold outreaches and building out sequences was very helpful. I think with with the pairing of the messaging though, now it's given us the comfort to understand, okay, if this cold mass outbound strategy isn't working, we've now got comfort in knowing that we can switch it, and now we can go for a different strategy, and having that confidence to do so is something that we didn't have before. And that adaptability, I think, is crucial, especially as the market evolves, technology changes constantly, right? You need to be able to have that confidence to change. And that's where I think a lot of commercial teams do get stuck sometimes, where we're doing it this way because we've always done it this way. But because we were just talking again before, conferences are now becoming back. They're now at a point where one-to-one and quality interactions are becoming higher priority for buyers, where for us now we can think, well, we've got our clear messaging. We can now apply these learnings to conferences. Although if we didn't have that knowledge and understanding, we'd be probably scrambling to figure out what do we do.
There's a couple of pieces to this, I think. It's easy to feel stuck with your growth and look for the answer and feel like, oh, it's cold email because this LinkedIn guru is talking about it, or it's just building content for the next 2 years until something works and things like that. And I think what a lot of people fail to understand, because you're building the business, you're in it every day, you're working on it, and you know that you have a certain way of doing things and it feels comfortable to keep doing that. I think what every founder needs to bear in mind is the channel that works for them might be completely different. It depends on their target market. It depends on the people they're speaking to. It depends on the skill sets that are in the team, because it might be that you have someone that works wonderfully on video, so start making YouTube videos. Or it might be that someone's incredible with like networking, so it might actually be a partnerships thing. And I think the real key there that you've just mentioned is when you know that what you're saying appeals to your ideal clients, it then becomes about the distribution side of things. And it becomes about finding what works best for you, testing, trialing different things and validating them. As you've said, cold outreach doesn't really work well for you, but conferences is. And content seems to be as well. Like right now, I think you've just started the zero waste living challenge, haven't
Oh,
you?
oh,
Yeah.
don't remind me.
And so it's about finding what works for you, and you don't have the confidence to be able to do that unless you work on that kind of base level thing first. How much do you expect all of this work to help you going into the next 12 months then?
I think it's going to be huge for us. It's one of those though, like with messaging, it feels like an abstract, right? It's like, oh, we've got help with messaging. And it's like, what does that mean? And I think from the way that I see it over the next 12 months, now we've got this really refined messaging, and the way we communicate has just become that much more effective. I also see one variable I will add, which has helped, is the market maturing. When we first started, it was definitely still quite early. And as the market's developed, policies catching up, conversations around the circular economy and the waste space are really starting to ramp up. And that's where we definitely see an opportunity with clear messaging to stand out, which we wouldn't have had before. So I think as that market grows and where we operate starts to really come into the limelight in a lot of ways, I do see the next 12 months are going to be pretty helpful. And even beyond that, with a clear understanding of who we are, what we do, you can almost become that beacon of light of the industry in some capacity, where people can look to you and go, yes, those are the guys that are doing this. They've been saying that for years and now we're ready for them. Do you know what I mean? So I think that's where I see it really helping the most in the next 12 months.
Why did you choose us to work with?
Why did we choose Plucky Bamboo? Really personable. Really liked some of the case studies. I reached out to some of your previous people you'd worked with and really impressed by their testimonials. And we knew it was something that we needed to work with. Really likable guy. I think that's one of the big, and speaking of those one-to-one relationships, I know Mikey was on your podcast first and was like, hey, you meet Chris, a really nice guy. You'll get on with him really well. And I think that's such an important part, right? But business is a lot about relationships. And so for me, it was like, I know in the early days, we were like, well, I can definitely form a professional working relationship with you, which was a big hurdle. We'd seen potential other business organizations we wanted to work with in the past, and there just wasn't that alignment on that. But I think that was one of the main reasons. And then, yeah, you just had the proof to show that you could do what you say you do, which is also a big part for anyone making a decision.
I pride myself on having like long-term business relationships with people because, especially with climate change, I think this is a big, hairy, complex problem that we're only going to fix with joined up, complex solutions. And so building those relationships between companies and building those complex solutions, I think is going to be the best way to solve this issue. Genuinely. For anyone watching, could you describe your experience in working with us? Obviously, we talked about the messaging before. We talked about the specific channels that we've worked on. Where do you feel like you got the most value from working with us?
We touch base every Monday, and it was always like touching base on how the week's going. And if you sent your weekly reports, which were really helpful. And then very responsive on messages, which helped me troubleshoot questions like, hey, Chris, I've got this idea for this. What do you think? And like using it as a sounding board. I thought that was immensely valuable because you've also got the knowledge outside of what we were just working with on the messaging and the ads, which was I really liked because I appreciated that we can tap into that as well as part of working with you. But no, I think the other thing as well, which I really liked, was the time saver for me. And this was another reason why we were in the market to try and find somebody to help us, or find an organization to help us, is because I'm early stage startup founder, right? My days are swamped. Now, I remember sitting down with my team and I was like, look, okay, I see this problem that we need to solve. I can either spend 4 to 6 months of trial and error to figure it out myself, or I can find somebody who's done it with decade of experience and can support me, and I can learn from them, and they can actually make probably a much bigger impact because this is their specialty, their skill set. It saved, I think, that the potential 6 months of learning, which is an ultimate cost that I would have accrued. For the most part, I do always try to advocate for early stage startup founders to learn themselves, because you need to understand what you're delegating when the time comes. Yeah. But there's also an element of time's not on your side. There's this level of urgency in startups that you need to have. And so there's always that bit of trade-off. So that for me was a big plus with working with you.
I have the same thing myself in my business. It's about like, what do you spend the time learning versus what do you delegate based on trust and everything like that. And it's a really hard decision to make. For anyone watching that's, I guess, in a similar kind of boat where they're not really sure if they should learn how to do this themselves or delegate it and find someone trusted that they can trust to do it, how would you recommend they make that decision? Do you have any kind of frameworks on how you make that decision?
It's a very good question. I wouldn't necessarily have got a framework per se. The way that I viewed it was, you look at, you know your skill, you got to be totally honest with yourself. What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? Now, if you've never done something before that has as high a leverage as ads or like marketing generally, right? It's usually there's a large return that you can then get for every dollar that you spend on it, because it's potential new business in the door, whatever it might be. There's a direct correlation to revenue and therefore startup growth. So I think when it's as high a leverage opportunity as that and what it could be, like the upside, when I was speaking to the team, the investment's worth it, because the conclusion that we came to was you can spend X amount with the potential to get 10x back because it's a high leverage skill. Whereas if you're looking at something that is not as high leverage, maybe that's you make a process more efficient, like an email process internal. You made some process internally more efficient, but it's a one-to-one bit of leverage.
Yep.
You could probably do that yourself and then automate it event like very quickly. But I think for the higher leverage stuff, I would bring in expertise, learn how to do it, and then you can work with the expertise to keep growing that. But the one-to-one side of stuff where it's like, oh, this is I don't know whether to learn how to do this process. Well, firstly, try and automate it as quickly as humanly possible. But at the end of the day, don't pay somebody to do that. You figure it out yourself and then you can get on with your day kind of thing.
How likely are you to recommend us?
I highly recommend, like highly likely to recommend you guys. We, really enjoyed working with you. Really enjoyed our catch ups. And like I mentioned, like the relationship outside of just the service that's being provided. Yeah, I highly recommend.
The final question for you is, why should someone listening act right now? Why should they reach out, not even just to Plucky Bamboo, but to any kind of consultant agency where they might need help?
This was one that I used when I was speaking yesterday, and I'm going to shamelessly say it again. Hope isn't a strategy. A lot of sustainability car startups that I see rely on hope. And I do have a big problem with it. I think hope is important, very important to have hope generally, and in terms of an optimistic view of life and where we're going as an industry and where the planet's going. And we're running out of time, so we need hope to keep it's better than the alternative. But I meet too many companies that would just say, oh, we do good for the planet. People are going to find us. We're a sustainable company. We're a B Corp. We're going to do all of these things and like, it'll be fine. And unfortunately, that mindset doesn't get you sales and it doesn't grow you as a company that will take you to the next level. And so from my perspective, if you just have hope as a strategy and your only hope, it won't work. You need to build in some form of system and process and treating like business as it is, right? It's ultimately, if that's what you're trying to do. So taking the plunge on organizations like Plucky Bamboo, who have got that industry experience, they speak with sustainability startups frequently, they can understand how to take you to the next level to make your impact bigger. Because ultimately, if you're a sustainable business, right, with sustainable impact, the quicker you act on this stuff, the bigger impact you can have. So why wait?
Appreciate your time today. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for taking the time. Enjoy chatting.